Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leader Generation, brought to you by ModUp. I'm your host, Tessa Burg, and today I am joined by John Arnold, and we are so excited to have him. He is the perfect guest to help us explore beyond the hype, what is really happening in marketing tech today, and what is the future of human versus automation and marketing automation platforms and other technologies that we're all testing and trying every day to work faster, better, smarter. John, thank you so much for joining us. I know we first met back when you were at Forrester, but to open up, tell us a little bit about your role now at Creatio.
Yeah, thanks, Tessa. Nice to see you again. And I guess my journey to Creatio was kind of a wild one. I started my career in a lot of B2B MarTech selling to other marketers and some startups, some big companies like Adobe along the way. But I found my way to Creatio through Forrester. So I spent 5.5 years. My research area was around B2B growth strategies. I worked with a lot of CMOs and SVPs of marketing in the B2B space to connect technology to the marketing journey. And along came Creatio as a sort of a newcomer in a way to some of the marketing automation world, because Creatio is a no-code platform and also a CRM and a bunch of other things. It's really not one thing, so it's kind of hard to put your finger on it. And when I was at Forrester and saw Creatio coming along, I immediately was captivated by some demonstrations that they gave to me around the AI and how that was going to change marketing. And I was working on some research around how marketing was going to change as a result of AI. And I realized that Creatio was kind of disrupting all of the things that I was thinking about. So decided to make the giant leap and put my money where my mouth was in terms of how AI is going to change marketing, and actually join Creatio. So here I am, and like you said, it's great to have this conversation with you because I know we've had other conversations in the past about
Yeah,
all this technology and how great it's going to be for marketers.
I know that is a bold move. And you said it really addressed a lot of the things that you had on your mind. Tell us a little bit more about what was on your mind when you were at Forrester. What were those biggest shifts and lessons that you witnessed from an industry perspective happening in the MarTech landscape?
Yeah, so when I was at Forrester, I was really thinking that AI was going to disrupt three things. First, the way that code is developed and the way that applications are developed. And the second is the way that workflows and automations happen inside companies, in the back office or in the front office, and how automation works. And then a very distant third was, the ability to create cat videos without real cats being involved. So this content generation use case that a lot of people are talking about. And I kind of always thought of those as separate things. There's kind of the coding world and there's the automation world, workflows, and then, and the cat videos. And so, but here comes Creatio, and all of a sudden I'm realizing that this company is disrupting all three of those things in the same platform. So that was really transformational to my research, and also just found it to be a great group of really smart people too. So that's how I ended up here. And there's a lot of talk in the media about ROI, the ROI of AI, and how are companies achieving that. And the other thing that sort of caught my attention was the fact that the practitioners who are actually deploying AI agents in their marketing workflows are seeing that ROI, and it's really clear. So again, just super exciting times. I think we're all living in a time where we're going to all remember what it was like to go to work before there were AI agents, and that's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is really interesting. You said something that when I think back in my career, used to be the opposite approach we would take in tech, which is a platform that's doing everything in one platform. And I remember even when I was on the client side and I was licensing tech and hiring agencies, the approach we took was we really want applications that do a specific thing very well. And, our CRM is going to be separate than our marketing database, is going to be separate than how we create content. And even in agencies, we were like, well, we want agencies that do one thing really, really well. But we're starting to see that the landscape is so crowded, and that when these applications in tech are all separate, it creates silos. They don't all work well together, and it puts the onus on the company then to connect them. And then if I make an update anywhere, God forbid, then I have to go and make sure I'm maintaining sort of this beast of a technology. Is that a challenge that Creatio saw? And are there other challenges that it's solving so that marketers can work more efficiently and get their arms around really empowering the experience instead of spending so much time trying to make
Yeah.
sure all the things are connected?
Yeah, that's such an awesome example of, old paradigm versus new paradigm. And there's so many things that are transformational that are happening now. And that's why, when I introduce this topic to audiences, if I'm speaking like I am at No Code Days right now at this hotel where I'm speaking at a conference, I introduce this as one of the most important and powerful business strategies to emerge in our generation, because there's so many things that when you get down into it, they're not just transforming, the technology, but it's really the way we work and the way AI works with humans and a lot of that. So, what you mentioned about the age old problem, I guess, or the at least, uh, old era problem of, do I buy one platform that does it all, or do I kind of build the microtech stack, or do I assemble a lot of best of breed solutions and stitch them together, or do I do some kind of hybrid of those two approaches so you can get a little bit of the best of and a little bit of the end-to-end platform? And that's been a struggle for companies for a long time. Do I have one center of the universe, and what is that? Or do I build all of these applications? So that's kind of the old problem. The new problem is really customization or composability. So instead of, let's go shopping for a vendor that has everything that I need, and probably either doesn't have everything that I need or has way too much, right? So there's some uh, problem with buying too much technology. And that happens, for example, in industry CRM. So a lot of industries, they buy a horizontal CRM, it has way too many functions and capabilities. They're paying for all of that, even though they don't use them, or they have low adoption of those features. Or they buy the point solution, and the point solution, because it's a smaller company and doesn't have, the scale and everything, they don't have enough features. And then to customize that, or to change that, or to right size that for the business is super expensive. You need an army of developers and lots of time and effort to try to get that to work. So enter the world of AI and no code. And when AI and no code come together, you're able to compose the applications. So you can start with either. You can start with the kind of all-in-one approach and kind of scale it back to your needs, and only build the applications that you need within that architecture. Or you can go with the best of breed, and you can compose all of the applications that fit your business model as exactly as you want to do that. And you can do that with a lot less resource and much faster, because you can employ programs like citizen development or no code developers, or you can use more junior developers to handle some of your business cases or applications that aren't enterprise grade and like have lots and lots of complexity. And you can use your professional developers to build the more complex enterprise grade solutions, and sort of separate those workforces and get exactly what you need. And a lot of people are calling that sort of the death of software as a service. Software as a service was, I'm going to wait for my software provider to develop a capability, and they have a roadmap and they have priorities, and some things get developed and some things don't get developed. And if you're on the receiving end of that, you kind of have to get what you get. And maybe you're even on the customer advisory board and you have some input into what gets developed and what doesn't get developed if you're a big customer. And that's totally out the door, because now if you don't have it, you just build it yourself, if you want to, on a no code platform. So it really is disrupting, not only the software as a service market, but this whole idea of, how do I right size my technology to fit the use cases that my business needs?
Yeah, it's funny when you were talking, I had like some PTSD when Salesforce ran a campaign, and it was called 1-800 no code. And it was all about how when you sign up, you don't need any developers to help execute it. And at the time, I was on the engineering side and developer side of the world. And a client of mine, I was freelancing, got Salesforce and told me how awesome it was. And I got attended one sales meeting, had no opportunity to do any tech inspection. But the end result was it required a lot of freaking code to do what the client wanted to do. And there was a awesome, great go to market, and they sold directly in to executives and people who can like hear the story. So when we talk about uh, no code today, and the ability to not have to wait for SaaS, to be able to make it work for yourself, like how are you showing marketers that possibility, and what makes this story real?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because, first of all, there's a lot of confusion around what no code and low code is. And even uh, you see it used in the same sentence, like it's a slash word, low code, no code. It's one thing. But actually, the way we think about that at Creatio is it's two separate things. So I'll give you an example. I started out my career in email marketing. And back in those days, if you wanted to build an email, you had to know HTML and CSS
Yeah.
because there was no way to build an email that had pictures and colors and design without knowing how to code. So you had to be, a software coder to be able to do that. And then a little bit later on, email marketing platforms came out, and so the idea of low code is really nothing new because those email creator tools were all low code platforms, right? You could go in and create the email yourself. You could drag and drop some of the elements of the email around, and you could access the code. And if you knew a little bit of JavaScript or HTML, that would help you to do some further customization. That was really nice. But that was still sort of like for developers who are maybe more junior or just people who have some coding skills. And you see the same thing with some of the legacy platforms where they call it no code, but it's only no code up to a point. At some point, probably pretty early in the development of an application, you're going to need to want to access the code. And a lot of times that's because they have their own specialized languages like Apex, for example. You're going to need to know how to use Apex because that's a domain specific language that's important to that platform itself. And if you don't know that specific language, you're going to struggle, or you're only going to be able to take it so far. So that's an example of what we call pro code or low code. When it gets to true no code and really being a no code platform, that's where the drag and drop elements and all of the experiences come into play, and you can actually assign or democratize the building of applications to business users or people who don't have any coding experience at all. And of course, there's code behind the scenes, right? So the word no code doesn't really mean there's no code anywhere. It's behind the scenes and it's being coded behind the scenes. But when you combine that with AI, this is when it gets really interesting. So moving beyond the idea of drag and drop interfaces and being able to create things by pointing and clicking, but now being able to design and build applications with natural language. So sort of like just speaking the apps into existence and vibe coding, if you will, right? So starting out with some sort of minimally viable application that's simple, and then continuing to use natural language to build out the application, all the while the AI agents are actually coding behind the scenes. So that's a whole new level of operability where you kind of get rid of the whole idea of a user interface, and anyone in their own natural language, whatever language your large language model supports, can build those applications. And what that means for IT, of course, is do you want to turn everybody into a citizen no code developer, or do you want to continue to keep that inside the IT organization and just create a landscape where IT doesn't have to do application development for some smaller use cases, but there's some oversight. Or maybe, again, you want to democratize that and you want to let business users build some of their own applications. You can maybe have a center of excellence around that, or enable those teams in some way to do some of that themselves and have some self-service around it.
Yeah, what I love about the democratization of coding and allowing marketers to speak an application into existence, it really is not about going around the developers or going around the IT department. It's about moving application creation closer to the point of expertise. And it's why I got into marketing. I was so fascinated by data and trying to really deeply understand what drives behaviors. And when I was on the client side, and I know I use American Greetings a lot as an example, but when we wanted to build an application or get something new done, we had to enter a ticket and then we had to get in line and wait till our developers were ready. And then we got to get into the vicious fun cycle of writing requirements, it coming back not quite what it is. Let's try again. Let's do this. Well, now months have gone by. I waited. I tried to write the requirements. And then, as anyone who worked with me knows, sometimes I built the application myself and launched it without permission and definitely got yelled at. But it created this weird tension between the marketing and the tech side. And it had everything to do with when you're an in-house developer engineer, how can you be an expert in the tech that you're building for the company and the way in which you're serving those digital products or perhaps software as a service, and also the way that you need to use completely different tech to get that product into market. And I love this theme of empowering marketers to now have a tool that brings their area of expertise, their skills to life. And, my perspective, it doesn't really take away from the engineers. The engineers are already busy. And if anything, it expedites the value the company is able to deliver. And relevant timing is everything in marketing. Um, so I love this approach, but what have you heard from your customers? Like, what are some of the other challenges or the ahas they're having when they're like, okay, this is why Creatio makes sense for us? And is there any pushback that it's not a Salesforce or not one of the larger platforms that I think companies just feel more comfortable buying?
Yeah, I think you hit on one of the big ones, which is that relationship between the marketing team and the IT team. And, yeah, in the old world, marketing says, I need a dashboard. And so you go to IT and you say, I need a dashboard, please. And, there's lots of pushback. There's lots of questions. What is this dashboard for? And who's going to maintain it? And where's the data going to come from? And who has access to it? And are you the only one who needs this dashboard or do more people need this
Right.
dashboard? Let's do some discovery. And those are great questions. And you need to have that kind of tension and those safeguards so that you don't waste resources. But in the new world of no code and AI, IT really does have that choice, right? To say, well, one option would be to, for some level of use cases, democratize or turn that into a self-service program where we say, you want your own dashboard in the CRM? Go ahead. That's a use case that qualifies for that self-service motion. And here we are. If you need any help, we can help you out with that. Or you might decide, well, we still create the ticket and the ticket comes in, but that process totally changes. So now we're going to go sit with that end user and watch them speaking to the AI and have a conversation about what they need, and maybe even read the transcript of the conversation with the AI and try to find out more about what these business users are really trying to achieve with their applications. And you might even create a center of excellence around that with some best practices, or try to talk to them about ways to do things. Because look, just because you're doing application development in a new way, it doesn't mean you throw away all of the rules around application development. You still need to test it. You still need to make sure the data is working. You still need to produce it in a sandbox environment before it goes live. And you have a whole application development lifecycle that you need to manage so that you can update it and where all the applications are being built and all that. So all that still doesn't just get thrown away because people are vibe coding. But you may also decide, because of those particulars, you might need to have more of a fusion team approach, right? So you still take the ticket, you still do that requirements document, you still have those conversations, and you still have professional developers involved. But the pace at which you can develop those applications and the speed at which you can get that first minimally viable product out the door is so much faster that instead of prototyping or the user interface getting in the way of the functionality of the application, you can actually build a version 1 of the application very quickly, and that can be the test model that the business user can go back and iterate and just start working with the application and get it right, so that you're not doing all the back and forth, so that you have to measure twice and cut once. So all of that is again just a new way of working, and for some organizations, it allows them to free up some of their greater technical resources. So if you have professional developers with lots of experience and lots of skill, you can deploy them on bigger projects that are more end-to-end outcomes and building very complex enterprise level applications that really differentiate your business. And those are high value use cases. And then you can take maybe, let's say, your junior developers or new developers that you're hiring in their first role, and you can put them kind of in the middle of helping out with some of the enterprise level applications and learning and growing, but also helping out with some of the use cases that are a little bit smaller and more core to the business and help those business users. And then you have some level of citizen development going on, where there's a center of excellence that's just enabling people to do it themselves. And that's a whole new paradigm that, it's not a change in the number of resources that you have, or the way that you're spending your IT budget. It's just, it's not a reduction in your IT budget, rather. But it's a different way to deploy those IT resources so that you maximize the value of the highly valued resources, compared to the things that just keep the business running, but are more rinse and repeat.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And sometimes, everyone at ModUp hears me say this, that all marketers need to take some basic data science and some basic product management and UX UI classes, because to build great applications and for us all to have and understand the context around the words that we're using, we need to be a little bit more generalist in the types of skills we have. So you might be deep in marketing, but what I love about this, bringing a team of different skills together, sometimes when our experience is so different, we're saying the same words, but based on our experience and context, we're projecting different meanings on them. And so again, what you're allowing is the marketer creates something. Once something is created, we all better understand what the objective is, how it's going to add value to our business and to the customer. And that measurement that you just mentioned, that this isn't necessarily less people, but these are people working more productively together. And you're not basing the success of AI on how much headcount you can cut, but rather on how much value you can create per head in a shorter amount of time. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's the biggest difference is you're building bridges, bringing folks together, giving them this opportunity to even learn new skills, build new skills, create a new way of working. And that is going to be extremely necessary as AI continues to accelerate.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because a lot of companies see this as a threat to the jobs or the hours, or people will be working less, or they'll be more productive with the hours that they have. And that's really kind of missing the whole point, right? The whole point is that when people in AI work together, you get a greater outcome and you get something that you didn't have before. It's like the 1 + 1 = 3 kind of a scenario. And how are you deploying those hours, and how are you deploying those human resources, becomes the root of the problem, or the root of the ROI. And the companies that are going to win in this market are going to be the ones that use humans really, really effectively for what they're the best at, which is connecting with the customer and building the relationships and understanding the business value, and how you're competing against substitutes or competitors in the market, and how you're going to use your resources effectively to do that.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to round back on a question I asked halfway, but it's because I think a lot of our clients are thinking this in the back of their head. How how can enterprises engage with a platform like Creatio if they feel like they're already too steeped in a legacy platform? Like, and I'll just, you know, like a Salesforce or a HubSpot or a comfortable platform. I feel like a lot of our clients right now in the back of their heads are thinking, do I add this on? Is this a replacement? Is this really built and secure enough for a company of our size if we're a Fortune 100, 500, Fortune 1000 company?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the way that we position that, and this is the way that all technology decision makers are really positioned, is that a lot of those legacy platforms are very entrenched in the business. So that's a reality, is that, those platforms have done a really good job of engrossing themselves in the business and really attaching and becoming critical. And they're really monolithic as well. They're tapped into so many different things that it's really hard to extract some of those things, even if it's useful to the business or beneficial to them. There's definitely some challenges with pulling it out or extracting that, or even making changes, significant changes to it. So what the reality is that you have a choice. You have the choice of either waiting for legacy modernization, because the legacy platforms are modernizing. They're investing millions and millions of dollars in lots of investment in transferring from the legacy architectures over to more modern architectures. And that has a significant cost and is going to take a significant amount of time. So you can wait that out, and they'll get there, eventually, over years and years and millions of dollars. They'll end up modernizing, and they'll have that sort of AI native architecture that they built from the ground up. Um, or you can cut over to the new era sooner. And there's a real benefit in doing that. For one thing, you're going to get the new capabilities right away, so you don't have to wait years for those capabilities. And you're also going to be in control of some of those changes. So one of the biggest pain points with legacy changes is that when the legacy architecture has to be updated, maybe you don't even see it coming, but sometimes you see it coming. But the amount of change that it creates is very expensive, and it's sort of like whiplash to have to deploy a whole bunch of technical resources to pivot and change. So you're not ripping the whole thing out, but you're definitely experiencing a lot of pain to make some of those modernization changes. If you cut over to the new era, then when those changes happen, you're on a no-code platform with AI native at the core. So those changes, it doesn't mean you don't have to make any changes or make any pivots. But when things change, if the markets change, if the technology changes or gets updated, it's just much simpler and easier, but it's also more nimble and agile, so you can make the changes quickly without as much resource. And so you're really more in control of how you want to. Whereas on the other hand, you're really not in control at all. One possibility also is to have a code deployment. So a lot of companies will deploy Creatio as an engagement layer or as the orchestration layer in the ecosystem of technologies, and then connect everything together, because that's sort of what the legacy platforms are doing. They're having to layer things on top of other things. So they layer the AI on top, and then they charge for it, and then they layer some sort of a no-code platform or a modern database. They connect them together, and they're all kind of different pieces of the puzzle that are all bolted together. And they're going to eventually slowly migrate those together or rebuild them so that it's sort of unified. And so you can kind of do the same thing by just taking the Creatio platform as the orchestration layer and doing your own connecting, and then slowly migrate things over. And that way you have more control. And a lot of times you can reduce the license fees on some of those legacy platforms while you're doing that, to kind of right size the budget for that and make it less painful than, dare I say, a rip and replace scenario where people have to rip out the old and put in the new. And that's very disruptive.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. And if I were to summarize it, there is no silver bullet. Like there's no one answer. Every company is different. And there's a framework we use that I will just offer up to the listeners. And it's people, then process, then possibility. But one thing for certain is the new era and the new way of doing marketing is happening now. And so the necessity to have developers, IT leaders on the same team with your marketers, that engineering power behind the way you deliver products and experiences is happening. And if you start with people first and look at what are the skills and move to process and identify where are points of tension, what's the cost of those points of tension, where are opportunities, what's the opportunity and potential growth and revenue that we'll get from working on those opportunities, and then you move to the what's possible. That will help each company determine what tech supports those possibilities and growth. But I love that you gave those three different lanes, because that is a jumping off point when you get to possibility. But like everything, uh, AI is solving a lot of problems, but it's introducing new challenges and new things for us to come together on and solve as businesses and with our clients.
And I'm glad you mentioned the people process thing because, um, a lot of companies start out with, well, let's buy the technology. And then what does the technology do? Let's do that.
Hmm.
So, for example, you buy an account-based marketing platform, and the account-based marketing platform allows you to target business on people who own or work for a business, and you can target those people with advertising. So, yeah, we've never done that before. Let's do that because that's what the technology does. And in that case, you probably get some pretty good value. But when it comes to monolithic platforms that have a lot of complexity, and you start off with let's buy the solution and figure it out later, you run into that complexity, and it gets really difficult. And so, the common practice is to say, well, you shouldn't have started with the technology. Let's start with the people. Let's look at what the customer journey is like. Let's look at your users and your marketers and your salespeople and figure out what their day to day looks like. And then let's work backwards from there and develop the customer journey that we want and develop all that. Well, then they run into the monolithic platform again, because the thing that they wish they could do with their customer journey and their users either isn't possible or is too expensive or takes too long, or they don't have the expertise or the funds to do it. And so they do all these workarounds and patchwork to try to get it to work, and it never quite works. And now in the new era, you're able to actually skip over this whole idea of, well, what does the technology do? The technology will do whatever you want it to do, and the cost is probably reasonable compared to the ROI that you're going to get from it. So now, when the technology is out of the way, you can go back to focusing on the people and the process, and you can be more assured, if you've been burned before, that when you start from that customer journey and work backwards, that you're going to actually be able to realize the functionality and the capabilities that will power that customer journey. Whereas before, it's like, well, we tried, but the customer, the platform never ended up doing what we needed it to do. And now it will.
Yep. So, John, we are already at time, but no worries. We have a whole other episode that we're going to record, and we're going to be jumping into the future of B2B marketing and advertising. This call or this podcast interview, we really focused on what that collaboration looks like with different people coming to the table to deliver that value and the process to make these decisions. And these are bold, big decisions more accessible. And we hope that, as a client, as someone listening, don't get intimidated. Yes, you have to make a bold decision, but starting at a simple place of who do you have? What are those points of tension? Where's your opportunity? As marketers, we're very used to starting off at that process. In our next episode, we'll dive deep into some research on more coworkers that might be showing up to your collaboration agents. And what does the future of agentic marketing and automation look like? But until then, John, thank you so much for this conversation. And if listeners want to find you, how can they do that?
Yeah, thank you again. I appreciate having me, and I'm glad I'm gonna come back. That'll be awesome. I was enjoyed my conversation. It went really fast, and yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. Just find me on LinkedIn, John Arnold at Creatio.
Perfect. And if you want to hear more episodes of Leader Generation, you can find them at modop.com. That's MODOP.com, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And until next time, John, enjoy your travels.
All right, you too. Talk to you again soon.